From the Diary of Bill Lowie, Tuesday, October 20th, 1964. Today I spent 5.5 hours flying a specially equipped helicopter for the Psychological Warfare Center. It was equipped with 6 speakers on one side. We had a Vietnamese interpreter on board who talked to the Viet Cong as we flew over their areas. We flew at an altitude of 2,500 feet. This was supposed to be the effective altitude for the speakers. Almost everyone over here considers the speakership a useless joke, but I was told by a MAG advisor that in some documents that they had captured, destruction of the speakership was given a very high priority. I am personally convinced that this type of warfare is effective to some extent, at least because of the fact that the people in the areas where the speakership is used are mostly illiterate, and that this is the only news that they get. Also, today I saw my first Viet Cong prisoner. He looked to be about 15 years old. He was armed, however, with a U.S.-made .45 caliber submachine gun. This entry offers insight into the psychological operations conducted during the Vietnam War, specifically focusing on the use of speaker ships. Popi describes his experience flying a helicopter equipped with loudspeakers used to broadcast messages to the Viet Cong. Psychological warfare was a strategy employed to demoralize the enemy, encourage defections, and spread propaganda. The Vietnamese interpreter on board spoke directly to the Viet Cong, while the crew flew at 2,500 feet, the supposed optimal altitude for effective communication through the speakers. Despite many soldiers viewing these speaker ships as ineffective, Popi learns that captured Viet Cong documents prioritize their destruction, hinting that these operations may have been more impactful than they appeared. Or perhaps the Viet Cong were participating in some psychological operations of their own, and made up some documents that they knew would make the U.S. helicopters waste their time. Who knows? Popi himself concludes that these broadcasts could be somewhat effective, especially in the rural areas where much of the population was illiterate and the speaker messages could serve as their only source of information. This entry also touches on the young age of Viet Cong soldiers. Popi encounters a VC prisoner who appears to be about only 15 years old, yet armed with a U.S.-made submachine gun. This brief moment underscores the youth of many combatants and the way military equipment often circulated among both sides of the conflict. His fears from earlier about U.S. guns being used against them seem to be validated by this fact. Back home, he had 3 boys, all under the age of 10. What did he think about when he saw the young combatant? Was he picturing his kids holding a rifle and shooting at a helicopter? My grandfather only took my dad to see 2 movies in his life. The first was Airplane with Leslie Nielsen. I still have happy memories watching that movie on repeat with my father. The second they saw together was Apocalypse Now. My dad said that Popi walked out during the movie. When I first heard that, I thought it was because the movie was inaccurate or disrespectful. It's actually because it was too real. I didn't watch the movie until I was an undergrad in college. It was required viewing for a history course. Without asking, I can tell you the exact moment Popi left the theater. Just picture it. Ride of the Valkyries, helicopters flying in formation. If you want to talk about psychological warfare, there's something psychological about danger hiding in the bushes. Bullets coming from the trees, children shooting at the front gates of your compound, gunshots waking up the entire base. Meemaw told me Popi couldn't stand certain smells, things like phosphorus, formaldehyde, and sulfur. Flares have sulfur. Would they use formaldehyde when he would transport bodies? He hated the 4th of July, too. Not because of what it stood for, he loved that, but because of the fireworks, the smell, the explosions. My dad told me they moved houses once when he was growing up because the street they lived on celebrated too much. He couldn't take the loud noises anymore. They gave him nightmares. They made him drink too much, though he swore he never had a problem. Sure, Popi engaged in psychological warfare in Vietnam, but he found ways to entertain himself too. My dad told me that when he went to a reunion for my grandfather, that all the guys joked about how they used to hang a target from the tail of the Psyops helis. Apparently, the VC used to train exclusively with targets. Put one in front of them, and they'd shoot at it. Popi would get back to base, and the target would be shot up. Good thing they weren't aiming at the cabin of the helicopter, I guess. Conversely, were they sending a message? Were they saying, we could hit you if we wanted to, but we just want you to get away? The photo I chose for today depicts a man sitting in a helicopter, cutting open a bundle of flyers. I've been told those were Psyops flyers, that they would drop over villages. When I showed this photo to Meemaw, with this diary entry in mind, her immediate response was, he's in the Air Force. Ever the officer's wife, her gut reaction was to point out the strangeness that the man in the photo wasn't in the Army. This shows the type of personnel that was used for these operations. I'm Alex Lowie, and I hope you have enjoyed listening to this episode of Dearest Suzie, and receiving messages from the past that my Poppy wrote exactly 60 years ago. I sincerely appreciate your time and interest. Please consider following the podcast on your preferred platform, and if you're enjoying it, I kindly ask that you take the time to rate the show and leave a review. Also, please follow the project on YouTube, X, and Instagram. All likes, comments, shares, and reviews will help grow the reach of this story. The links for these things should be in the description of this episode. Please feel free to email me at dearestsuziepodcast@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to say. I'd love to chat or to hear about your stories as well. Thank you for listening, and God bless.